My name is Milza. I'll be the moderator for tonight's discussion, and I am also the coordinator of the Africa Study Circle, along with Dr. Abubakar Sulaiman, who is also a speaker tonight. I'm very happy that we have managed to organize this interesting discussion around what is happening in Gaza, and we'll be looking at it from the African perspective. I'm sure all of you have read or learned about South Africa's actions taking Israel to the ICG. So this is an interesting aspect to look at, as well as Africa's positions in this very important development. So the topic of the discussion is African response to the genocide, and it's a joint collaboration between the AMEC Africa Study Circle and the Palestine Studies Circle, who is coordinated by Dr. Ferooze, who is also a speaker tonight. And we will also have Mr. Shariff Abu-Bakr, the third speaker for tonight, who is a Malawian retired major of the Malawi Defense Force, holding a Bachelor of Arts in Quran Sciences and Islamic Studies, and also a degree, a political science degree from IIM, who is currently a PhD student. So we will begin by covering the latest update in Gaza and Palestine for 15 minutes. Then we will discuss, we'll go through the general perspective on Africa's positions in the Israeli-Palestine conflict, including the pattern of Africa's votes on Israel and Palestine war. That will be covered by Dr. Abubakar. Lastly, we'll have Mr. Sharif will walk us through South Africa taking Israel to the ICG, the significance and developments. And after that, of course, we'll have a 20-minute Q&A session. So please, while we're discussing, you can drop your questions or think about them, and we'll discuss them at the end. And Dr. Ferooze, I'll pass the floor to you now.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good evening to everyone that is in Kuala Lumpur and to everybody else that is over here on our topic that we are going to talk about. We are trying to create a nexus between the African continent and some of the development in Gaza. In this context, I would try to give a very brief report on what is happening in Gaza. Now, my talk will be divided into two objectives. The first is to understand the ongoing negotiations, a very brief description on the ongoing negotiations, and second, the situation on the ground. Okay, without further ado, let me go to the ongoing negotiations. We are aware that on 7 February, Hamas outlined the plan for a ceasefire with Israel in Gaza. The proposed ceasefire is in response to Qatari, Egyptian, and the United States mediation effort in Paris on 1 February. So the CIA and the rest of Israeli intelligence, they met in Paris to come up with a proposal for a ceasefire. And they forwarded the proposal to Hamas. What Hamas responded was a 3-stage ceasefire process that would see hostage prisoners released on both sides. Each stage would last for 45 days, according to the plan. Now, apart from these different types of terms, Hamas also underscored the importance of having Israel to withdraw all its military assets and soldiers outside of Gaza. And Hamas also emphasized the need to end the overall siege on the street, in the street. So, of course, Israel did not agree to that counter proposal made, and we have seen a few responses. Among them is Netanyahu calling it delusional on 9th of February. So this is in response to Hamas's counter proposal. Now, if we compare Israel's response to United States, we observe some form of difference. United States response on it has been largely mitigated, and to an extent, if I would also call it rather a little positive. For instance, Joe Biden called the proposal a little over the top. Blinken suggested that it creates space for agreement to be reached. Now, despite Netanyahu's rebuke, circles within the Israeli administration is still keen to engage in some form of negotiation, indirect negotiation with Hamas, because of the fatigue, both from a military and from a political angle. So there's a growing fatigue within the Israel entity itself on this whole war, except for Netanyahu, who is trying to actually cover up the whole reality that is happening inside Israel by coming out with a robust statement to project Israel's strength in this area. Now, so this is the current development on negotiation. Now, if we go on the situation on the ground, it is not really positive as we are speaking. For instance, today marks the 126th day where the genocide is still ongoing in Gaza. Death toll in Gaza is slowly breaching 28,000 lives. Now, more than 2.3 million Gazan citizens have fled from various cities to Rafah. Now, the problem that we are now facing is the prospect of Netanyahu ordering IDF to prepare an evacuation plan. Now, for what the evacuation is for? That is for a prospective ground attack in Gaza. Now, Rafah will likely face ground assault, according to various news outlets. There could be many reasons to this action that has been currently that's been announced. It is yet to be operationalized, but it has been announced. The military is looking into plans of actually presenting some form of plan to Netanyahu on the possibility of doing such. Now, how do we make assumption about this latest remark that has been made by Netanyahu? In my point of view, there are two types of assumption that we can make at this juncture, because we lack information on what this whole plan is actually about. So therefore, assumption is needed at this juncture. Number one, I think Netanyahu is engaging in the theatrical political strategy. Netanyahu is in his usual self, being a politician, that is to exert maximum pressure on Hamas in order to produce a more flexible ceasefire deal. So we must understand there's a contradiction between Netanyahu's response to Hamas' proposal on the 9th February, where he highlighted it as delusional, and his response to the Paris Agreement, where he responded in a rather positive way. For instance, he labeled it as constructive. So there's a contradiction there in the sense that Israel wants to negotiate. They want to extract some form of a deal from Hamas, but at the same time, they want to do in a way that they would not lose much ground on the whole situation. They would want to make any ceasefire to look as if that Hamas is equal to them in this whole negotiation process. Therefore, there is a need to pressure Hamas into coming with a more flexible ceasefire proposal. Now, the second assumption is that now Israel military is quite confident that Yahya Sinwar and the hostages are in Rafah. Therefore, any ground assault in the region will be successful. So this is my second assumption why Israel announced the probability of launching a ground assault in Gaza. So they are quite confident. Now, even if that is so, there is a logistical paradox in assumption number 2, because to achieve the above objective, there is a need to evacuate a majority of 2.3 million citizens in Rafah to a safer place. We must understand that over the period of the war for the last 126 days or more, citizens have been moving from the northern part up to the southern epicenter. So before, there was not as much people in southern Gaza, but because of the influx of refugees from northern, now the number of people has actually reached 2.3 million citizens. Now this will present a logistical challenge to Israel. Remember that during the early start of the war, Israel tried to evacuate 1.1 million people in northern Gaza, and they failed. They did not evacuate the entire population in northern Gaza up to southern Gaza, and it caused a lot of death over there. So what more? 2.3 million people in southern Gaza itself. So I believe this is a logistical challenge for Israel to engage with the program. Therefore, launching a ground assault, if it is done, it's going to cause a lot of problem. Therefore, going back to my first assumption, it could be only Netanyahu's political projection of power. He wants to pressure Hamas into coming out with a more flexible ceasefire deal. Now, apart from this observation, we must understand that there is growing uneasiness within US foreign policymakers on Netanyahu's conduct. We have observed statements, the choice of words that has been utilized by US policymakers over the days has been less mitigated. They are more frank, they are more upfront on Israel and also on Netanyahu. We must understand this development in one way or other is a show of dissatisfaction on Netanyahu administration. Okay, and it is not a show of dissatisfaction for Israel's policy and political project. So we must distinguish between a dislike for Netanyahu and his administration and a dislike for Israel as a whole political project and its political objective. I foresee that US is really looking forward to get rid of Netanyahu and to have him replaced with some other individuals. And if that scenario actually happens, then in one way or other, it would actually make the situation to be less precarious as we are seeing at this point of time. So that is the situation. We must be able to distinguish between the hate for Netanyahu and also perhaps the hate for Israel. So there's no lost love between United States and Israel and its political project, except now we are seeing US is actually not really happy with Netanyahu. So therefore, this is my last slide. It is a very brief discussion about the whole process of what is happening in Gaza. I'm looking forward for our Q&A. So I will be explaining further if there are questions on the situation in Gaza. So thank you very much. I return back the floor to Milzat.